Hey, I'm Andy. If you don't know me, it's probably because I'm not famous. But I did start a men's grooming company called Harry's. The idea for Harry's came out of a frustrating experience I had buying razor blades. Most brands were overpriced, overdesigned, and out of touch. At Harry's, our approach is simple. Here's our secret. We make sharp, durable blades and sell them at honest prices for as low as $2 each. We care about quality so much that we do some crazy things, like buy a world-class German blade factory. Obsessing over every detail means we're confident in offering a 100% quality guarantee. Millions of guys have already made the switch to Harry's, so thank you if you're one of them. And if you're not, we hope you give us a try with this special offer. Get a Harry's starter set with a 5-blade razor, weighted handle, shave gel, and a travel cover, all for just $3 plus free shipping. Just go to harrys.com and enter code FACE at checkout. That's harrys.com, code FACE. Enjoy!
This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our observance of Black History Month and we're focusing on our HBCUs, I'd be remiss if I did not invite to join us this HBCU, as it was, you've often heard me say, the very HBCU where my mother gave birth to me when she was a senior in 1966. And of course, it is one of my alma maters, having graduated from the Howard University School of Divinity. We are joined this morning by the 17th president of what is known as the Mecca, Howard University. President Wayne A.I. Frederick joins us this morning on Make It Plain. Dr. Frederick, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm doing well, and thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. First of all, one of the things we want to take a look at is how our universities are doing in this challenge of the pandemic. How has Howard University in general been coping with that?
You know, I would say that we've been doing well, actually. And I think that's because the fundamentals of who we are, what we are about, was made for this moment. The pandemic has disproportionately affected African Americans, and we've been very interested in healthcare disparities, as you would know, throughout time. And so we set up testing centers very early on in Ward 7 and 8, where the population is 95% African American. We now have a vaccination center set up during this period of time as well. And that's really servicing the community, getting African Americans vaccinated. And we also are participating in a phase 3 trial for the Novavax vaccine as well, and actually have hit our enrollment target primarily to bring African Americans into that study. So I would say, you know, we've really met the moment in terms of serving the community, in particular our students, as you can imagine, are affected just like the rest of the country, and disproportionately so. So we also have given hardship grants to our students. And so our enrollment actually is up 17%, while the rest of higher ed is down 3.4%. So we actually have been doing, you know, I would say pretty well, but built for the moment is how I would like to describe that.
So enrollment has actually gone up.
Enrollment has gone up significantly. But this was part of a trend that we had been on. Applications were going up. We have been making our case out in the public to students and families that our graduation rate is going up. We've been coming up with innovative programs like Howard West, where we send our students out to Google and have them co-taught by Google engineers and Howard faculty. We have Howard Entertainment with Amazon Studios, where several of our students are out there as well. So those innovative programs as well have been attracting talent to the university. So we really anticipated doing well. We were concerned the pandemic might soften the enrollment, but it actually did not. I think with students being able to stay home, not pay for food and housing on campus, that actually may have given some students a better opportunity.
You know, I've been wondering too, with the virtual experience that many having, and as that becomes more proliferated, I wonder if that's a space that we'll all be required to remain in some point. And does that not help enrollment? I mean, sometimes is it easier for a student to attend virtually?
Yeah, sometimes it is, but to be quite honest, as you would know, having been on Howard's campus, one of the beauties of what we do is that social engagement. There's a self-actualization that comes from being around Black excellence that we don't try to explain, but we try to embrace. And I think we do it well enough that that's what students get. Having said that, there is a space for that. We actually are looking at carving out that space more so for students who may have left the university 5 years or longer and did not graduate. We're looking for an opportunity to give them a way to finish that degree. And we think that there is a market for that. And that will also help uplift our community, especially if we focus on technology type skill sets, teaching machine learning algorithm, regardless of what major you had, because you may already be in the workforce. And so getting a Howard degree, we wanted to add some skills to what you already have. And so we're looking at that as an opportunity, given what the environment has taught us.
Back to the health related issue, though, Howard being one of our few of HBCU teaching hospitals and HBCU hospitals. I've been speaking with the president of Meharry a few times during the course of this pandemic, and we've all kind of seen what's been going on. Yeah. I think the latest numbers, over 25% of deaths in the pandemic are African American, yet we're only 5% of those vaccinated. It has, and being out there in the community, what is Howard raising that issue, combating that issue in terms of the disproportionate access to vaccine that some of our communities are getting?
Yeah, constantly. We're not just raising it, but we're trying to provide a solution. So that's why we stood up a vaccination center. Every morning we have throngs of people coming in very efficiently. We're getting up to an ability to give as many as 200 vaccinations an hour. And so we feel very strongly that we can get that out. So we've been pushing out information on podcasts, webinars. We've been calling our patients to let them know we have the vaccine and set them up for appointments. So we've been doing everything possible, not just to get the word out and to raise the concern about getting more African Americans vaccinated, but we also have been working hard to vaccinate them. The other thing that I would mention about this, our students who are volunteering in the center, I think that's a very important part of the social construct. I think it's extremely important, especially today in our society, for African American elders to see that next generation engage them, and for that next generation to be able to provide that service to their elders. I think, people who have come into our vaccination center, I think they can immediately feel that flow of energy between the generations that we oftentimes think don't speak, don't connect, and you can see it. You can just see the pride in the patients who are getting the vaccines, and you can also see equally as much the pride and admiration in the young students who are getting the opportunity to provide that service.
Dr. Frederick, is there anything in particular about Howard University's great and long history that has prepared it for this moment of crisis to serve our community?
Yeah, most certainly. We have been focused on the issues of the African American community throughout our history. So we have been a trusted messenger. So we're not showing up today with a new message. We're showing up with a reaffirmation that we've had a drumbeat on all along, and that is that your Black life matters and that we are here to help serve you. The other thing I think it's important to note is that we have to look at our history, and our democracy is messy. Let's be clear about that. But it still resulted, even in this mess, in sending the first Black and female vice president to the White House. But what people may not realize is that Howard's charter, the only federally chartered HBCU, was signed on March 2nd, 1867 by the 17th president of the United States, Andrew Johnson, who actually was an open racist and on the same day vetoed the first Reconstruction Acts. He created, by signing that charter, the very university that produced that first Black female vice president. So sometimes I know we we wrangle over the existence of what is happening in our democracy, and it doesn't always work the way we'd like it. It's messy, but I think overall it does work.
That's actually pretty paradoxical. Do we know what made him sign the charter for Howard and then in the same stroke deny the Reconstruction Act? Do we know what was going on there?
Yeah, it's not clear. You know, obviously the people who brought it forward, General Oliver Otis Howard, was well respected, participated in the Civil War, lost his arm, was part of 17 men in the Congressional Church. So it's not sure. You know, one of the theories is maybe he signed it because he didn't think it would work. A university for Black people at that time, right after the Civil War, he probably felt, okay, this would be the concession that I'll give you guys. And this is never going to come to fruition.
There'll never be somebody in the White House from this school. That's probably what
Right. That probably wasn't even a thought.
Right. That's probably what he thought. But speaking of Howard being a federally chartered school, I know one of the other conversations is proper funding for our HBCUs. Where is that with regards to Howard and anything you can share about HBCUs in general? I know everybody went up to see Trump. I don't think anything really came of that. But that's part of the struggle too, seeing to it that our HBCUs have adequate funding.
Yeah. You know, funding has been an issue. I think there are two ways to look at this. I think sometimes our schools are described as under-resourced. I myself have used that term. And I've started to make a shift because what I think is important is how we spend our money, not that we don't have enough of it. Howard is almost a $1 billion organization. So the issue is, are we prioritizing appropriately? And are we investing in the things that we need to invest in? And as well, are we bringing along other friends of the university? So are we playing in the philanthropic game as well? We have to make our argument to Congress because 22% of African Americans who receive bachelor's degrees come from our HBCUs, and we only represent 3% of the higher ed institutions. Howard produces more African Americans who go to medical school than anyone else. We have produced more African American physicians than anyone else. And then when you look at Harvard's MBA program over 50 years, where they got their Black talent from, they got it from Harvard undergrad, number one, but number two was Howard University. So what we do for the country in terms of talent and diversifying requires investment. There's no doubt, but we have to also be looking at broader investment. So I would say right now that's improving. I think we're making a more coherent case to the federal government on a consistent basis. And yes, under the Trump administration, there were a couple of things that did take place that helped HBCUs. The HBCUs who participate in the Capitol building finance and after Katrina had damages and used that money to rebuild their campuses. They had those loans forgiven. And I think that was an appropriate thing to do. Title III funding was also expanded. Again, I think that was an appropriate thing to do. But let's remember that there were lots of people in Congress that got those bills passed. I know the White House takes a lot of credit for it, but there are lots of people in Congress that had to participate to make that happen.
Are you getting signals that the Biden-Harris administration is going to take a real and a greater interest in HBCUs and in Howard in particular?
Well, what I would say is this, two things. One is the race equity executive orders and the focus that President Biden has placed on that is a major signal. You can't talk about race equity in this country and don't include HBCUs in the conversation of the solution. So I think in and of itself, they've clearly already made that step. The second thing, as I've been telling my Howard alum, the best thing that we can do for VP Harris is to be our excellent selves. We don't need to put pressure on her to bring funding for us. If we are as excellent as I believe we are, the data will be compelling, the results will be compelling, that she will be the person showing up to the party as opposed to having to organize the party. And that's the situation we need to put her in. Let her colleagues and others come to her and say, Howard is doing an excellent job. Your alum are out in the community doing an excellent job. I try to remind people that many of my alum, including people like yourself, are in the community doing this type of work every single day. And that is ultimately what I think should rise to the agenda in the White House.
I would agree, and you should know, as someone who works hard on the HR 40 legislation. I'm a member of the National African American Reparations Commission. One of the things we're arguing for is that any form of reparations institutionally should include our historically Black colleges and universities and prioritize those that have our teaching medical schools as well because of the health disparities. So we're going to be fighting for that. There's actually a hearing on HR 40 February 17th, and so I'm sure that's going to come up. Lastly, in your own words, Dr. Frederick, how does it feel, though? And I agree with you. I think that's a good approach to be our excellent selves. But how does it feel? How much pride is there to actually have a Howard alum in the White House as vice president? And what does that mean in terms of the continuum of history of our great university?
Yeah, as a Howard alum and as its president and a big consumer of its history, it means a lot. It's a reaffirmation of what we are about. You go from Senator Edward Brooke, the first African American popularly elected senator after Reconstruction. You go from him through Thurgood Marshall, the first African American Supreme Court Justice, Toni Morrison, Vernon Jordan, and you come all the way to Kamala Harris. So she stood on the shoulders of giants that participated, some of whom didn't get to see this actualization, like a Congressman Cummings, who I think would have been totally overwhelmed with emotion. And so I think it does that. But on a personal note, as I have gotten to know VP Harris as a friend, I do want to underscore to people that while we may focus on her gender and her ethnicity, at some point in the course of the next 4 years, and I hope it's sooner rather than later, we'll begin to talk about her charisma, her experience, her political skills, her intellect, because that ultimately is what is going to separate her from the 48 men who previously held that position.
And all of those talents and characteristics first incubated at Howard University as well. So we want to do that. Dr. Frederick, my brother, so good to see you. Thank you for joining us on Make It Plain. And as an alum myself, I know that I am always at Howard University's service. Please feel free to call upon me at any time, okay?
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Stay healthy.
You too, my brother. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, another one of our HBCUs, illustrious HBCUs, is represented by its president, who has had an illustrious academic career himself, former provost and vice chancellor and professor of history at Elizabeth City State. He's also been a provost at Alabama A&M, provost and professor of history at Fort Valley State, among others. And he attended North Carolina A&T. So he is a product of HBCUs. He received his PhD from Howard and his MS from North Carolina Central and his MA from Winthrop University. Now, he currently serves at the illustrious HBCU I alluded to. You all have heard me say time and time again that I was raised literally on the campus of Fisk University. And so how could we focus and feature our HBCUs without talking to Fisk University? We have the president of Fisk University here with us today on Make It Plain, Vann Newkirk Sr., Dr. Vann Newkirk. Dr. Newkirk, how are you today, man?
Man, we're doing well. Just glad to be here with you today.
Yes, sir. Glad to have you. Let me also mention those of you who are looking at the graphics for our show, with special permission of this library and special collections, it features a mural of one of the great Harlem Renaissance artists who was stationed at Fisk University, Aaron Douglas. And he designed murals within what was then the old library, the Cravath building, which is now the administration building. So when I would come home from school every day, President Newkirk, I'd come into the building to my mother's office. She was an administrative secretary to the president. And I would always come upstairs and see all these Aaron Douglas murals. And I was mystified by them. They were just so grand for me to see as a little boy. So we're sharing those today. And we thank Fisk for allowing us to do that. Dr. Newkirk, how are how is, I should say, the university faring in this pandemic situation? How have you all been weathering that storm?
Well, I could say, everyone's heard the old story about the ant who prepared for the winter. Well, I can tell you this. We were ahead of the curve with COVID. We formed a COVID task force back in January, late January, before any institution had started that. We started planning for COVID because we felt that it was going to be a major thing in the United States. We pulled together all of our faculty, had plans laid out, and to let you know exactly how good it worked, we brought our freshmen in this past fall for a 7-week session. Then we brought the other students in for a 7-week session, single students to a room. But we only had 7 cases of COVID on our campus last fall. We did a Herculean task of making sure that all of our students were safe and that we had a very safe and clean campus. And it's helped us because this spring, our enrollment, we have about 88% of our students who come back. We had the largest enrollment last fall at Fisk than we've had in about 15 years. And so, most HBCUs, and I remember this was a meeting of the UNCF schools this year, only 9 UNCF schools had enrollment gains. The rest of them, 20 so schools, had enrollment decreases of 20 to 30%. And what was interesting there, we had enrollment growth, enrollment gains. And so people are now looking at quality and looking at the safety that we're able to provide. And I think for us, this pandemic, while it's tragic, it has been a time that Fisk has been able to hone in what it does well. Small school, we're agile, we're nimble, we can make changes. And because of that, I think we're faring well in this pandemic as we go forward.
That's good to know. The president of Howard was saying the same thing. Their enrollment has actually gone up. So that's a good thing. Now, have students also been attending virtually?
Well, we got it in both ways. We have a number of students who want to stay at home. They're really afraid. But then we have students who want to come to campus. So what we did is that we reduced our housing capacity to half. So every student now has a single room. We have 2/3 of our classes are online. The students can take if they want to be online, but 1/3 are offered face-to-face. And what's interesting about that, our room capacity, we were out of rooms last fall. This spring, we're pretty close to being out of rooms. So we feel good about where we're going. And those students who are on campus to make sure that they're safe, we're doing a lot of safety checks. We have partnered with Meharry, so we have students doing tests at Meharry. So all those things, I think, are helping us. And unlike many schools, we're next to a medical college, so we're using that connection to help us. And so we feel very good about it, the education that we're bringing, the quality of education. And we're also feeling good about what our students are doing. Our students are making some adjustments. Our faculty are making some adjustments. But for us, as this small institution, we've been able to adjust very quickly when we had problems. So it's not been one of these long, drawn-out processes. We could adjust quickly when we had problems in class offerings and make the changes that our students needed.
Indeed. How do you feel about the new administration, the new Biden-Harris administration, and what impact that may have on our HBCUs and what impact that may have, especially when it comes to Fisk?
Well, what's happening, there have been a couple of COVID relief packages that were passed by the prior administration. And there's been some forgiveness loans that were passed by the prior administration that has helped HBCUs. We're looking for a closer relationship in Washington. I think for us, I like going to Washington at least once every couple of months to actually build relationships, create new partnerships. And I think having this relationship with the new administration is going to be important to be able to build and to grow and have people come down and visit our campus. And I want to say it in this way, in that the past administration, we did have meetings with them in Washington. But the one thing that's missing, I think, was having people come to see exactly what we do, come to our campus, see what we do, experience the things that we do. I think that's going to help people have a better understanding of HBCUs and also an appreciation of what we do. I think our Vice President of Advancement, this past year, he did a survey of students who recently graduated from the university. And we had about 100 of those students to respond. Now, I want to tell you this is really important, is that the average income of those students was about $75,000 per year. They only been out of school 1 to 2 years. And so what's happening is that we as a university at Fisk, we're not just preparing students for a college degree. We're preparing students for the jobs that exist. It's a lot different. There's jobs that exist and good jobs. And so what's happening there is that we are marketing directly to our partners out in the community. We have partners like Google. We have partners like Cravath, Swain, and Moore, which are major law firms, and we're actually preparing students for the jobs they have, internships, and that's helping us go. So the administration, I think, having connections to an institution, knowing the institution, I think that's important for us, and being able to come down and see what we do. I can tell you all these stories, but it's nothing like seeing and meeting our students. I think that's the important part.
Is it too early, or have you already been in touch with the new administration? I know the prior administration made a big deal about getting the photograph with all the HBCU presidents, but has anything happened with the new administration yet in terms of direct contact and maybe getting them to agree to come and see Fisk?
Well, right now, I think, they've been kind of preoccupied with some court cases in Washington, but I think, they're making some inroads and they're reaching out to people at this point in time. And I think we should see something, I hope, in the next month or so as they reach out to us. It's important to note that our vice president has some sorority connections, and those connections I'm a Greek. And so, because I went to Howard, I've got some connections that we probably can reach out and touch her. And so that's important for us, someone that we can reach out and touch that's high in the government. I think that helps us as a university. But, getting some other people, because, she's obviously not in the Department of Ed every day and not talking with them every day. Having the Department of Ed involved with our university, knowing what we do, I think that's important. That gets us the connections and the inner workings that we need to be successful.
Since you mentioned her, talk to our audience about the significance of having someone in the White House who's a product of an HBCU.
Man, I really want to say we could not have asked for a better choice to be vice president. And I think what's important about that, what I mean in regards to HBCU growth and progress, she understands. She's been a product of an HBCU. She knows the nurturing aspects of an HBCU. And I think that's going to help us to build and to create. For so long, we've had people who've been in power in Washington who perhaps drove by an HBCU or perhaps had a few presidents come up, but not really know the culture. And I think that's going to be important for us in order to have someone that can explain it from a top level, that can actually advocate from us for the top. And I think that's the key part of getting the recognition and getting the support we need to be successful. I think as a small institution at Fisk University, we do a lot. We're the best kept secret in North Nashville. But what I want us to do is to be the best kept secret that everyone knows about across the nation. I think having a person who's actually gone to an institution that's a sister institution to a Fisk, that's going to help us a lot, because that's going to help us get our message out and get it to the right people. And people can then understand, because it's been validated. I mean, she's validating the quality of education that we produce.
And I admit it's impressive to hear the income level of those coming out of Fisk so soon. I mean, that says a lot right there. Tell our audience a little bit about, we don't want Fisk to be a secret, a little bit about Fisk's place in history and some of the ways that Fisk has impacted America and American history and Black history.
Well, I always say that the birthplace of the civil rights movement is Fisk University. If you go back and look at some of the early leaders that came out of Fisk, we got Ida Wells that came out back at the turn of the century fighting lynching. You go to the next level, you got W.B. Du Bois, who's intellectually started the NAACP fighting injustice. So we go through history. We got John Hope Franklin, who's writing books, who's talking about some of the persecution and what's going on. And those books are becoming important tools that people are reading and writing. And I think what's important, if you've never seen this, if you go to Fisk, in our art museum, they have the original plates of the souls of Black folks. And that's a moving exhibit. If you just see that box of those old brass plates, to think about that book and its impact, well, it's right here on the campus. If we go forward into history, we got John Lewis, who came out of the university. John Lewis is pushing and fighting for the university. We've got others who've come out. Kim Whitley, he's a graduate of the university. So I'm saying to you, when we start talking about social justice, and we start talking about the impact of this university. I was writing an article the other day, and I started using these words. Fisk was the primary advocate of civil rights in the South. And someone asked me, why would I say that? And I started going back, tying our graduates together and the things that they did. And they said, you need to say it is not just this birthplace. It is the civil rights movement in the South. And so, I will say that, and I think our impact is far beyond the size of a small school. Last fall, we started our John Lewis Social Justice Center. And that was an offshoot of our old Race Relations Institute. We had a Race Relations Institute for years, which had advocated for, equal treatment across the nation. And it closed about 10 years ago. And we actually kicked that off again. And right now, we have majors that actually sprung off that. We have a social justice master's program, the only in the South. And what's been important about that social justice master's program, we just kicked it off last fall. We had about 200 applications for about 9 spots. And so I'm just letting you know that is a major program, and we're getting more applications each day. I think this spring we did take in some students, but we only had about 6 student spots, and we had about, I guess, a couple hundred applications coming in for people who want the training. And the training that they get is going to be a unique pitch where we look at our history, we look at what's happening in the world, and then our archives are just absolutely immense with issues and cases that they can research. So I think that's what's allowing us to say that we are the birthplace of civil rights, and we're the continuing force in regards to civil rights as we move forward.
And no, that's beautiful. And isn't it true that part of our struggle, part of us attaining our civil rights is getting people educated to make a difference in society? The fact of the matter is, most African Americans going forward in higher education in the professional world are still being educated at HBCUs. Isn't that true?
That's it. I mean, we have I want to say a footprint that's far beyond our size, HBCUs. I mean, we have about 15 to 70% of all Blacks that are in college go to HBCUs now. The numbers have gone down. But what's important about it is that we turn out the majority of Black physicians, they come from HBCUs. The majority of Black lawyers, they come out of HBCUs. It's because what we're doing right now is that we're instilling in these students confidence. We're instilling in these students a sense of pride that they don't get in many other institutions. And I think at our institution, we are doing a yeoman's task to get our students to understand who they are and to take part in leadership roles. And I think that's helping us a lot. I see young people come to the campus who may not be quite as confident as they should be, but when they leave the university, I mean, they are tigers. And I think that's what we turn out. We take people, we take them for tiger pups, we make them tigers when they leave there. And they're ready to fight the battles and move forward.
And no question about it. And, I've been saying to others, I'm 54. So growing up on campus, me and some of my peers felt like because we've been raised on HBCU campus, we didn't necessarily have to go to an HBCU. So I went to Georgetown at first. But I worked for Coach Thompson, so it was like being in an HBCU. I say to my peers today, though, our children, it's time to go back to return to our HBCUs for just the reason you said, especially as we see the way, frankly, even in the past 4 years, race relations have deteriorated. Our young people need to go back and just like, they tell us to recharge these new electric cars, go and plug ourselves back in to our own historic institutions, don't we?
We do. I think, the Black Lives Movement and what's happening in our country, I think that's actually opened up so many doors for HBCUs as students try to reconnect with what's important, and they try to reconnect in a nurturing environment. And I think what's happening for us is that we've actually told our story. We're telling our story all across this nation. And that's one of the things that's happening as we build our enrollment. Students are coming back because they like the social activism at Fisk University and what we do. And we want to make sure that all of our students are endued with that. So we have a special curriculum that students pick up when they come to the university. They talk about social justice. They talk about the university's impact. And I think all of those things are important to new students. And it's important to what's going on in America now. I also share this little story with you. We started a first branch campus in the university's history in Clarksville, Tennessee. And it was targeted toward the military. And that campus, we've been increasing our enrollment about 100% each semester. I mean, it's been doubling each semester since it's been at 3 semesters. But we got a lot of young men from the U.S. military. And we started asking, why are they coming to Fisk and why did you pick Fisk University? And they said, point blank, although there's a state university in town, they wanted an HBCU experience. They wanted to experience what we offered. And that's been our biggest selling point as we've been in this town. And so we feel good about it, and we're giving them an HBCU experience.
Dr. Newkirk, that's outstanding, and it's good to know. We so appreciate you being here with us. Brings back a lot of great memories whenever I'm in Nashville and on campus. And folks, at one time, Fisk was called the Harvard of the South. You know, I used to say, well, maybe we should call Harvard the Fisk of the North. But I remember I was a little kid when they installed the Du Bois statue. Was glad to be back there a few years ago for his 150th. And so, folks, Fisk is doing a lot of great things. And yet here's another example of one of our great colleges and universities continuing to play a significant role for our people and continuing to educate people. You heard him say how well Fisk graduates are doing. And I also know how active Fisk alumni are as well. So that's a great thing. Dr. Newkirk, we wish you well, and we're glad Fisk has you, man.
We're glad to be here. And I tell you what, we're trying to make our mark. So our mark is started. We've started with some new things at the university, and I'd like to see everyone come over and visit and give us a call and look at what we have, because we are ready to go.
Indeed, indeed. Again, Fisk University that's 1866. So Fisk was, of course, one of the earliest ones that was founded. And they've been on the front line educating our people for over a century. And so we appreciate that. Dr. Newkirk, we thank you, sir.
Dr. Mark, thank you again.
All right. All right.
I'm Danielle Moody.
I'm Touré.
Be sure to check out Democracy-ish, where we channeled the frustration, rage, and absurdity that was the 2020 election, as well as discuss the current state of the political climate and our country from a Black perspective.
New episodes available every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you stream your podcasts.
And ladies and gentlemen, joining us next to round out our conversation with this triumvirate of great institutions we've talked to today, another one of my alma maters, along with Howard. I didn't go to Fisk, but I was raised on that campus. But I did graduate from Howard in graduate school and UDC undergraduate. And of course, I'm speaking of the University of the District of Columbia. We're honored to have with us today our dear friend and brother who hails from Tulane. He's been a leader at Tulane and then at Jackson State and in the Southern University system as well. So he has a great deal of experience when it comes to being an administrator at some of our best colleges and universities, and here to also talk to us about the HBCU experience and how UDC is faring in this pandemic. Dr. Ronald Mason joins us from Washington, D.C. Dr. Mason, how are you, my brother?
I'm good, Reverend. How you doing today?
I'm good. Always good to see you and good to talk to you. And well, let's begin there. How are things going at UDC in the pandemic? How have you still been able to meet? How well have you been doing and still meeting some of the needs of the students?
We're actually, as an institution, doing pretty well. We were fortunate in a lot of ways. We had a strategic plan called the Equity Imperative, that was really rebuilding UDC as a model for urban higher education. And it turns out that we didn't have to change the plan at all because of the pandemic, because we were headed in the right direction anyway. When we had to go to emergency remote delivery, we had just upgraded all the technology, and all of our full-time faculty had been trained in teaching online. And so we were able to make the pivot really well. And based on surveys, the students said we did a good job. Our retention rate was up, which means that the students that were here, we served very well. You know, the challenge for us, though, was students transitioning from high school to college, because, you know, most of the students we get come straight from DC public schools. And so we lost enrollment, and that was where most of the loss was, with students that really just couldn't get education high enough on their list of priorities to be able to get an education as well as take care of their life needs at the same time. because we serve students with high needs, especially in our open enrollment door that we call a community college. And so in that area, we're still working with the public school system to try to find them and get them back on track.
That's really why UDC exists. That's always was one of the historical challenges in DC, and for generations, and probably to some extent still is. You come out of high school in DC, you have real life adult things. Sometimes there's a need for remediation, and it was easy. Folk my age graduated from high school were fortunate to get jobs in the federal government, and now are retiring and didn't go to college, didn't have to. So yeah, that's the unique situation. As a matter of fact, let's deal with the uniqueness. So I always want to get this right. UDC is the only urban land grant institution. Do I have that right?
Not quite.
Okay, I'm sorry. Help me with that.
So we are the only public university in the nation's capital, and we're the only exclusively urban land grant university in America. Land grants were founded to democratize education, but most of them work in rural areas. But schools like Cornell work in rural and urban, but we have one service area, and that's the District of Columbia, which is exclusively urban. And so that's one of the things that makes us unique. Now, if you want a few other things that make us unique, we're basically a university that is an entire higher education system for the District of Columbia. And so unlike most other universities, we do everything from workforce training through technical and academic associate's degrees, through bachelor's degrees, all the way up to PhDs now. And also we have a law school, as you know. And one of the things that we're doing is connecting the pathways from when you walk in the door for a workforce certificate, you can actually see the entire workforce pipeline all the way up through to a bachelor's degree. And we have multiple credentials and multiple on and off ramps along the way, so that you can, for example, in technology, you can start out as a coder and end up as an electrical engineer, but then work and get off and on as if you never left in between. And we think that really is going to be the model for the future of education, and we're ahead of the game in that regard.
Absolutely. The other thing too, UDC is still, for those who don't know, still primarily a community institution. There's not, on-campus residency. So it's uniquely designed for students with life challenges, life demands, who often work and have jobs, have children, families. It's really built for that, is it not?
Well, that's our niche, and that's our history. 1851, Martilla Minor School for Colored Girls. That's our root. But the interesting thing is that we're a historically Black university, but we're about 60% African American, and a little over 50% of our students are half eligible or Pell Grant eligible. And so, just like the district is really two different cities. It's the richest and poorest city in America. We kind of cover it all. And so, we have some students that come to us with great challenges, mostly from DC, but we also have some students that can afford to pay tuition. Now, we're the least expensive university in the DMV as well, the district and the surrounding area. And so you can get an education at UDC, you can get an engineering degree for about $50,000. And then get a high-paying job at the end of the degree, so you don't have that anchor of debt around your neck. So we have a niche now. And the other thing, and this, let me just throw it out there. You know what the TAG scholarship program is, which is the federal program that pays DC high school graduates $10,000 to go to school at other state institutions, and $2,500 to go to other HBCUs. And so we get a lot of the students that can't afford to go away to school even with the TAG scholarship. And so we have a special niche, which is why our vision is to become the model for urban student success, because that's where our focus is, and that's what we do.
And that's kind of where it's headed. I think people realize, even in this pandemic, where the technology is going. Now, I want to go back though. You said something interesting. Your teachers were already trained to go virtual. So why was that? What prompted that in the first place?
Well, as I was telling you, we do have a plan that we've been following, right? And the plan is to build UDC as a model for urban student success. And so in the process of implementing that plan, one thing we knew we had to do was upgrade our technology. And I have to thank Mayor Bowser. She's been putting money in our budget to help us do that. But also to be able to use electronic tools in the teaching process and learning process. And so we've just been going through our faculty every year, and more have been getting trained. We've probably been at it about 3 years now. And by the time we made the switch, about 80% were already certified. But then we required that all of them had to be certified to teach online. And then we moved to the adjuncts. And now all the adjuncts have to be certified to teach online before they can teach at UDC. And so, I think we're doing a really good job with that. And the surveys that we put out to the students kind of confirm it.
You alluded to a few fields, but what are some of the professional fields where UDC is graduating the most students?
Well, we cover quite a bit, and depends on what level you're talking about, okay? And so if you come in to the workforce training program, workforce certification, which is free to every district resident, right? That's technology. Those are healthcare workers. Those are hospitality workers. You come up through the associate's degree level. Those sort of track the workforce programs, but then the teacher programs kick in. From there, we have, a school of business and accounting and business administrations are our strong suits there. We have the College of Arts and Sciences, which is our largest college, and that's criminal justice, that's political science, that's also social work. Then you move over to the School of Engineering, which is electrical engineering, computer science, mechanical engineering, and civil engineering. And then I'm missing a school, and I think I got them all. Oh, and the law school, of course. The law school, which is nationally ranked, best for diversity, best for women, one of the top 10 schools for women in America. And so, we have a lot going on here, and it just depends on, what area of the workforce that you're looking for. But I think what makes us special is that we can provide workers at every level of the workforce. And so now we have PhD programs in engineering and computer science. We also have a really neat program in, that's the other school I forgot, Causes, which is our land grant program, where we touch 30,000 DC lives a year, right? But we also have a PhD program in urban leadership, which is catching a lot of attention nationwide because urban leadership is going to be a trend for the future, since most of the world is going to be living in cities in the next 40 years.
Yeah. And in that vein, when we think of a lot of our HBCUs, of course, we talked to Fisk and Howard today. Their residential campuses, they're in areas like that. Talk to us about how it's still, even in an urban institution like UDC in the middle of the city, commuter, how that still is a contribution to the HBCU experience. In other words, you don't lose any part of the HBCU experience at a school like UDC.
No, you don't. And we have some housing, but we don't have a large number of residential students. We're primarily commuter, but we do have the same homecomings. We don't have a football team, but we have a basketball homecoming. As you know, we used to have football. And we don't have the band. Now, I've worked at two other HBCUs, and I know what a big deal the football team and the band is, but we do the best we can. And our student leaders do appreciate the HBCU culture that we bring to the table, and I'm sure you remember it from the days you were here. In some ways, the fact that we don't have dormitories really worked in our favor during this pandemic, because I know a lot of the institutions have students in dormitories but taking classes online, which doesn't do it's not a value added when you can stay home and take a class online for a lot less money which is why I'm hoping that some of these students will look at the value added of just going to UDC for a semester. We can take them and give them the credits and then send them back where they came from when they're ready to go. But, we're HBCU through and through, and the students wouldn't have it any other way. If you look at our mission, we claim the HBCU space. And I know, HBCUism, if for lack of a better way to put it, is really a culture and a perspective and a relationship with the students that, we share with every other HBCU out there.
About it, and you heard President Mason mention the law school. The law school used to be standalone, folks, and then it merged with UDC. And I remember when it happened, all the other private law schools are in Washington, D.C., Georgetown, American, GW, and everything. But then I started to notice a whole lot of folk were like, we need to go check out the UDC School of Law, and it has grown so exponentially, and as he said, has really been a leading ranked law school in the country. UDC is one of our public institutions. Now, again, folks, the struggle is statehood. So we say a state institution, even though DC is not a state yet. That's what we're all struggling for. But having said that, there's what you get from the DC government, the soon-to-be state. But is there anything you find optimistic in the new administration? Will this new Biden-Harris administration benefit UDC's needs? President Mason, do you think?
Well, we hope so. All the signs are there. There seems to be a new appreciation and understanding of the value of historically Black universities. And I don't think it's about any charitable, feelings coming up. I think America just needs talent. And they realize two things. One, that most of the talent in America is in the 90% of the population that has to share 22% of the wealth, right? And so they're brown, they're Black, and they're disadvantaged. But that's always where HBCUs have specialized in finding talent and developing it. And so if America needs talent, why not go to the institutions that are experts at developing talent where most of it is? And so I really think it's a self-interest that's arising in the nation and in the government that is focusing more attention on HBCUs. So there's that, right? And then second, I think that this administration has a greater sensitivity. And of course, the vice president went to an HBCU, right? And so there's a perspective there based on firsthand knowledge that I think can't help but bode well for us as a sector of the industry. Time will tell. I've been around a long time. I've been on 3 presidents' advisory committees for HBCUs. And the words always start out with a high level of excitement. But then, when the cameras go off, sometimes things level off. But you get a sense it may be different this time. And so we'll be pushing to what I think is our advantage at the moment.
And let's be honest, coming out of this pandemic, the economy is going to change. Some of us are going to have to go back and learn how to do something else, y'all, or brush up on what we didn't get a chance to brush up on.
Right.
Shoot, folks, we sitting at home anyway, might as well. I mean, and you wouldn't want to take advantage of situations like that. This is Black History Month. From your perspective, President Mason, having been at several HBCUs, at our landmark HBCU now in Washington, D.C., talk to us about the importance of HBCUs in our history as a people. And if there specific reference to UDC and its important, its place in history for our people.
Sure. So when you say our people, you're specifically talking about Black people, but I also think that HBCUs have been important to the American people in general, right? Look, HBCUs are institutional reflections of Black people. And so, the two things about Black people and Black institutions is one, that we've always been denied access to wealth. That's the way America's designed. And so HBCUs do with a dime what a lot of institutions do with a dollar. And that's true, right? But the other thing about it is that we outperform. When it comes to the production of graduates in key areas, especially in the sciences and STEM areas, HBCUs overperform beyond any reasonable expectations. And that's the same thing true with Black people. I mean, if you look at what we've had to deal with and been challenged with over the course of history, and then go to the African American Museum downtown and see what we've been able to do in spite of it, it really is, a wonder to behold. The fact that we're still here and still sort of holding America together until it can figure out its race issues and get past them. So there's that, right? And then the other thing is that, we really have been able to drill deep to find the talent that America has in many ways wanted to stifle and suppress, because, it really is a rigged competition. And so you have to get rid of some of the other competition to keep the rigged competition rigged. But we've persevered in spite of it. And because of that, the nation is still in the game of trying to become America that it claims it wants to be. And I think HBCUs have been at the forefront of that conversation and that fight.
No question about it. And so have you. We appreciate all you've done. Now, so UDC can brag a little bit, folks, because we had Fisk on 1866, Howard's 1867. UDC is actually 1851.
Right.
Marcella Minor, an abolitionist. The
colored girls.
The normal school for colored girls, 1851. And so UDC has bragging rights in terms of longevity.
Yeah, we do. And look, you mentioned UDC and its history. The history of UDC is the history of DC, right? Marcella Minor merged with Wilson School for White Girls, which became DC Teachers College, which merged with Federal City College and Washington Technical Institute, which became the University of the District of Columbia. And you can just sort of watch the progress of the district from being a territory to a home ruled jurisdiction, and the university has been right there step in step with it.
Another great history, and still making history every day, folks, with the work that UDC is doing, and we're so thankful for that. President Ronald Mason, our very special guest of all of our presidents. They've all been here, Howard, Fisk, UDC, and we're so glad to have had them all. Thank you too, President Mason.
Thank you, Reverend. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, my brother. Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, subscribe, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.
Not all bread is created equal. And if you like yours soft, fluffy, moist, and delicious, then Hero Bread and Buns should be your first choice. But Hero Bread isn't just about taste and texture. It's high in fiber with ultra-low net carbs with 0 grams of sugar. Order today at hero.co and use the code AH10 to get 10% off your first purchase. That's AH10 at hero.co, HERO.co for 10% off your first purchase.